Welcome to it. Happy Football Friday, Broncos country. Welcome to another edition of From the Nosebleeds. I am Richie Carney, sitting in for Joey Gunner alongside our senior Broncos writer at Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan, Andrew Mason. Good morning, Andrew.
Morning, Richie. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited for what is to come this weekend. The Broncos have, albeit it's an AFC-NFC matchup, so not a conference matchup here, but what I think is a pretty significant kind of measuring stick game for this Denver Broncos team as they head down the final month of the regular season in which they hope to finish with the top seed in the AFC. Where is your barometer at about how much this game against the Green Bay Packers means for this Denver Broncos team and how much the result of this game can be used to evaluate this team's postseason potential?
I mean, it's not obviously the first game they've played against a really good team, of course. I mean, you've had other barometer type games. I mean, you had the Eagles game back in week 5, and you had, of course, the Chiefs are struggling in terms of record. That was another barometer type of game last month. But this one feels a little bit different. And I think part of it is you're facing a team that appears to be cresting, appears to have figured some things out in the last few weeks. You're facing a quarterback in Jordan Love, who appears to be peaking as well. And it looks like the Packers offer an offense that is tailored to cause some problems for the Broncos defense just 2 weeks after Washington poked some holes in the Broncos. Now, normal service got restored in Las Vegas last week, but certainly Matt LaFleur is the type of coach who's capable of coming up with a game plan that, when a template was established not long ago, that certainly could mimic that, and he's got a lot of the personnel and certainly has the quarterback to do a lot of the things that Washington did. And then on the defensive side for Green Bay, they have a player in Micah Parsons who is capable of doing the things that, say, Von Miller did for the Broncos in that 2015 run. I saw that in Thanksgiving against Detroit. He's a closer. Like, he closed out that game, closed out the Lions and Jared Goff. And we also saw last week against Chicago, the Packers come up with the interception, come up with the big stop at the end. So we're seeing the Packers are starting to become that team that they're doing the types of things that terrific teams do, and they're sitting there right there, only a half game behind the Rams, who certainly look like a Super Bowl team themselves. So, I mean, you could argue the Packers are right there, top 2, top 3 teams in the league right now. The Broncos are certainly in that conversation as well. So I think for both sides, this is a measuring stick game. I think the Packers might look at this as a measuring stick game. I certainly think the Broncos are as well.
I agree with you, Mace. I think that the people who are out there kind of trying to frame this matchup as a potential Super Bowl preview lends to the fact that both sides can equally probably view this game as an opportunity to really put themselves up against one of the premier teams in their opposing conferences. And I think that you pointed to other measuring stick games throughout the season. You mentioned the Eagles early on, obviously the defending Super Bowl champs. You had the Chiefs, who were the Super Bowl runner-up. And I think that the way that those have been punctuated throughout the season has been relevant, but I also think that this one carries some particular importance and weight. One, because of the dance that they're in with New England for the top overall seed, which I think is vitally important for the Broncos if they are going to put themselves in position to make it to Santa Clara. And the Bills and the Patriots will play in the early window at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. And so we will know maybe potentially what added importance or relevance this game against the Packers can have from a win-loss and a standings perspective. But also, Mace, I just think that in between those punctuated games that you've mentioned, there have been an equal amount or at least a certain number of games that have made you kind of raise an eyebrow and go, gosh, man, sometimes when this Broncos team in their Jekyll and Hyde type of nature, when they're on, man, they look like they're one of the most impossible teams to stop, especially on the defensive side of the ball in the NFL. And when the offense can click on the majority, if not all of its cylinders and create that complementary nature, it really does put the Broncos in a position where you can say, hey, this is a team that, like Sean Payton prophesized in the offseason, can win a Super Bowl. It's just kind of a matter of whether or not those things are going to align, coincide at the same time. And frankly, Mace, I view the Packers in a very similar light. I think when Jordan Love in particular is rocking the way he was on Thanksgiving and when things are clicking for Matt LaFleur and that offense, Green Bay looks like a world beater in the NFC. And that's saying something considering the fact that the Rams week in and week out look that way, that Seattle by and large has strung together the majority of its performances in a fairly dominant fashion. But when that offense is not firing on all cylinders, it starts to look a lot more mortal. And I just think that's kind of an AFC, NFC mirrored situation between the Broncos and the Packers that are going to go head to head this weekend.
Yeah, the Packers, I mean, you look at it's funny because with the Broncos, you look at some of the numbers, especially on the offensive side, and they're not the offense. The numbers aren't really impressive, even though the end result is going to be what you want. And yet, the Packers on the offensive side, the numbers are impressive, and sometimes you think, okay, well, the consistency isn't quite there. They're leading the league in EPA per play on offense. They're leading the league in EPA per drop back on offense. I mean, that's a lot of that is Jordan Love. And they're leading the league in EPA per drop back, even though you don't have a receiver who's on pace for 1,000-yard season right now.
Yeah.
Like that's an interesting
kind of Buffalo Bills-esque there.
Yes, like there. I mean, you know, some that now obviously Christian Watson has had an injury, and that certainly
Jaden Reed at the beginning of the season,
right? So that affects you whether you're gonna have 1,000-yarder, but it's it's a very cast of characters. You know, sometimes when you watch the Packers and you say, okay, who's the wide receiver? When it's whoever open, and he's spreading the ball around. Vance Joseph alluded to this on Thursday that you've got to worry about 5 targets out there with the Packers. And that actually creates an interesting challenge for the Broncos, because one of the things that has given this Broncos defense problems over the last 2.5 seasons, that this Broncos defense, there have been some wobbles, like December of 2024, for example, early on, September of 2025. But for the most part, this Broncos D has been very good going back to October of 2023. And the one type of team that consistently has caused this defense problems in that span has been the team that spreads the ball around to an array of targets. You think back to, like, for example, the Washington game just 12 days ago, and Marcus Mariota was spreading it around, and he wasn't afraid to throw in Pat Surtain's direction. So you spread it around, and that means throwing it at Surtain, challenging PS2 from time to time. We saw the Colts do that in week 2, for example. All Chargers do that in week 3. And so if the Packers continue spreading it around, and thus there are some throws in PS2's direction, and thus the Broncos are defending the whole field and not necessarily having PS2 side be kind of the no-go zone, as it is for some teams that go against them, that's where you start to see things kind of wobble a little bit. And so that's where even though the Packers, like you say, it hasn't always looked as impressive as the numbers show, it has, at least in the last couple of games against the Bears and the Lions, started to kind of be where the form is catching up to the data. And this type of offense is tailored to attack the Broncos in a space where in the last 2.5 years, they had some trouble countering what an opposing offense throws at them. So matchup-wise, this has the potential to cause Denver a few problems.
I want to expand on that a little bit, Mason. You touched on some of the metrics just a few minutes ago, but when we're looking at this Broncos defense, they as a unit run man coverage north of 50 to 60% of the time that they're on the field, which I believe paces the NFL. And the Packers offense in particular with Jordan Love at the helm has if they're not sole possession of first place, they're tied for first place in EPA per play against man coverage. So it seems like you have a little bit of a strength versus strength situation going on with this Packers offense that plays very well against man coverage, and the Broncos defense who excels in man coverage and runs it more than 50 to 60% of the time that they're on the field. Do you expect from Vance Joseph's perspective that the Broncos defense looked at this game and says, hey, we do what we do best and we're going to roll it out there? Or do you anticipate some more zone looks to be mixed in, considering how well Jordan Love and the Packers play when it's one-on-one?
Well, there's the old cliche that, if you get to a big dance, you dance with, the person who brought you there.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's not the only thing that Vance Joseph does. And one of the things that VJ has done so well is throwing curveballs in at opportune times. So I think you'll see a foundation of man coverage in this game, but it's when you toss those curveballs in and how you do it. Are you doing it, say, like, okay, third and 4, now is the time to change up the coverage here, right? Like, that's you do that at the right time to confuse and discombobulate it. You combine it with the right rush. You combine it and because here's the thing: you combine those coverages with the rush that comes from everywhere, and like that's another strength of this Broncos defense is that when you do mix up the coverages and go from men, that you complement it with a pass rush that does come from the slot corner, that does come from the inside linebacker position, that even gets supplemented from safety from time to time. And because of that, you don't know, you put an increased stress on the running back who's staying in for protection. You put an increased stress on the tight end who's staying in to chip, and you just cause more confusion. And some of the Broncos sacks this year and some of their quarterback hits and pressures that are most disruptive are coming from rushes that are designed to confuse rather than just simply are a case of the Broncos man beating the man in pass protection. So
yeah, there's certainly a schematic element there,
right? So this one reason why I saw this on ESPN on ESPN.com this morning from Dan Graziano, listing Vance Joseph per his sources around the league as the number one coaching candidate in this year's cycle. It's not just because of his experience and how much he's grown. It's also because of how he's using the talent at his disposal. People around the league know that this is a highly creative defense in terms of taking advantage of the personnel that he has. That he's matured as a coach. He's matured as a defensive play caller. It's it's calling to mind in terms of how he throws his curveballs at an opponent. It kind of calls to mind Wade Phillips 10 years ago in terms of, he had his base man coverage. Wade preferred man, just like VJ prefers man. But when Wade would mix it up, I recall, for example, against Minnesota that year when the Vikings are driving toward what would be the game-winning points there at the end of regulation, and Wade throws in a safety blitz. You get the sack, fumble on Teddy Bridgewater, ball game. He'd throw those curveballs in at the right time. And that's something we're from VJ. And I expect, you'll see a foundation of man, but when he mixes it up, if he continues to do that at the right time, just as he has throughout the year, then I think you could end up seeing the results that you want to see from this defense in this matchup.
May somebody that's been an absolute Broncos killer over the course of their career has been Josh Jacobs, right? Whether
Yeah.
it's with the Raiders and now with this iteration here in Green Bay. But Josh Jacobs has missed the last 2 days of practice on Wednesday and Thursday. Fill our audience in on the latest on what we need to know about the potential availability and or effectiveness that we're expecting from Josh Jacobs and how that might impact the offensive side of the football for Green Bay.
Well, he played hurt last week, and the thing is, he practiced leading into last week's game against Chicago, and he played hurt and was still pretty effective for the Packers. Did not practice Wednesday, did not practice Thursday, and when he talked about it on Thursday with Green Bay media, he not sound very resolute in terms of whether he was going to play. Very iffy when he discussed it. So definitely it's very much up in the air as we talk about this here on Friday morning, whether he's going to play or not. And the thing with Josh Jacobs, of course, is he's got 4 100-yard games at the Broncos. We know all about him, of course, because he played for the Raiders for so long. He's been very effective. He's actually got 9 touchdowns in 8 games against the Broncos.
Oh.
I mean, you can say he's been a Bronco killer. He's never been a part of a loss to the Broncos. Now, for a lot of those years, the Broncos were
Right.
mediocre to bad. So put an asterisk on that. They're a much better team now. But for the Packers this year, he's been very effective. And one of the reasons why their offense has worked so well is because not only do they have balance in terms of distributing the ball among the pass-catching targets, they also have good run-pass balance. Josh Jacobs has been good for roughly 20 touches a game, which has allowed the Packers to maintain a nice sense of rhythm, allowed them to effectively keep defenses off balance, allowed to control the tempo in games, having a consistent run back like him. So if Josh Jacobs isn't out there for the Packers, profoundly changes what they can do. And certainly when you look at what worked against the Broncos coming out of the from Washington, it was just Washington could spread the ball around. It was also that they had the element of being able to supplement that with the run, with those draw plays up the middle in particular. And without Josh Jacobs to go along with that, Green Bay would play with a hand tied behind its back. So the status of Josh Jacobs might be the most massive storyline to look at in the next 48 hours leading into this game.
Couple of quick ones here on the way out, Mace. We did get some encouraging developments on the injury front for the Denver Broncos as both Ben Powers and Nate Atkins are working their way back into form after spending some extended time out of the lineup. I think the Nate Atkins one is interesting in a sense because even though Evan Ingram's been labeled for large chunks of this season, and partially because he did it and Sean Payton did it themselves, as the Joker for this offense, I think the way that Sean Payton uses Nate Atkins is similar to what we thought that might be. And I think his participation and his presence on the offense goes a little bit underrated. But I think the Ben Powers one is interesting for me because Alex Palczewski sliding into the lineup in place of Ben Powers, who's been missing time for about the last 2 months or so. It's been going okay, Mace, I would say. And obviously, that's the best case scenario that you want. But given the turnaround time here with the game against Green Bay about 48 hours away and the ramp up period, I think is it safe to say that there won't be any shuffling back on the offensive line this weekend, but maybe something that they're ramping toward? Or could we be looking at a situation where Palczewski returns as that 6th swing tackle type of player that he's made such a valuable role up to this point with Ben Powers back in the lineup as your starting guard?
I would be surprised if Powers plays this Sunday. I think they'll probably take a little longer approach with him and maybe aim, like you mentioned, to bring him back for one of the future games my guess is it would be the Jaguars game, just because it's been 2 months for him. And Palczewski has played well enough to where you don't have to rush Ben Powers back. So it was definitely a good sign to get him back this week, get him back practicing, but they don't have to speed that along. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Broncos kind of slow play that a little bit and let him truly get up to speed, especially given the nature of the matchup. Now, the nature of his injury. Now, Nate Adkins, the sign that you got for Nate Adkins playing on Sunday was the Broncos waiving Mercedes Lewis from 53, likely bringing him back on the practice squad at some point. But that's the sign that Adkins should be good to go. Now, I wouldn't call him the quote-unquote Joker because he's only got 6 catches in 6 games, and Joker refers to more of a pass-catching target. What he is that jack-of-all-trades guy who helps out primarily with blocking responsibilities because he can be your inline tight end. He can even go in space and block, and he can also be an H-back and a fullback as well. Now, that's where his role kind of gets interesting because he could have done some stuff at fullback, but Adam Prentice is doing so well in that role, and Adam is now taken on even a bit of a ball carrier type role from time to time with J.K. Dobbins out, that I'm curious to see Adkins' snap count in the game, because some of the backfield snaps that he would have gotten H-back, fullback type, I'm not sure he's going to get those anymore because Adam Prentice has emerged and has probably earned a little bit more work. So Adkins' role might be a little bit modified in this and maybe more of a clear tight end 3 role, with him assuming the special teams responsibilities that he had before.
In closing here, Mace, I want to ask you about the trenches, because I think the ability to control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball for the way that these two offenses are set up and the fact that both teams are primarily driven by some pretty significant defensive efforts throughout the course of their season, I think that's going to be a huge determining factor in which team comes out of Empower Field at Mile High with a victory. Given the dynamic that we see at play with the Broncos offensive line as is, factoring that Ben Powers is not going to be in there and it'll be Palczewski, given the fact that R.J. Harvey, without J.K. Dobbins as the lead back, has started to kind of string together a couple of encouraging performances back-to-back, but also the fact that Green Bay's defensive line is pretty stout with a pass rush to complement it. And you could really flip that for the Broncos defense and the Packers offense, seeing what we have, and we will get an update on Josh Jacobs. Which team, as they are both presented, do you think has the bigger advantage in the trenches to kind of control the pace of play at the line of scrimmage the way the Broncos did against the Raiders?
The Broncos do, and just simply because they've got a bit of an advantage up front with their offensive line. This is even without Ben Powers. I mean, Alex Palczewski has settled in and played well enough. This is one of the best offensive lines in football. It was one of the best last year. It's one of the best this year. You have Garrett Bowles playing at an all-pro level at left tackle. There's a reason why they want to keep this group together. I mean, just you may not have other than Garrett Bowles, the way he's playing this year, you may not have anyone that's the best at what they do. I mean, say, sure. Quinn Miners, he's been dealing with some stuff this year, so it hasn't always been vintage Quinn Miners the way it was last year, but you have the rest of the line. Mike McGlinchey is in the top 10 right tackles in football. Yeah. Quinn Miners is in the top handful of right guards in football. And Luke Wattenberg, he's growing as a center, and specifically, he's among the best pass protecting centers in football. And if you have to choose, okay, can I have the better run blocker or pass protector, the more premium skill is going to be pass pro, and that was a big part of why the Broncos chose to sign him. So And with that and the growth of Alex Palczewski settling in and mastering yet another position there in reserve, you've got a unit that you really like. And to me, that's that plus Zach Allen on the interior defensive line right there on pace to exceed his league leading quarterback hit tally from last year. When it comes to the trenches, the Broncos are going to have an advantage over pretty much anybody they face when you add it all up, just because of the quality of O-line they have, and then someone like Zach Allen and what he's doing on the interior. Plus, you get DJ Jones back, so now you're back to full health on the defensive line. So the Broncos are going to have that advantage against almost anybody they face in the trenches.
I love it. I love it. I can't wait to see how it pans out on Sunday. That will do it for today's edition of From the Nosebleeds. Make sure you like and subscribe to our Denver Sports 1043 The Fan YouTube channel. You can find us at Denver Sports 1043 on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. We will catch you on Monday bright and early for what we hope is a Victory Monday celebration as the Broncos find a way to overcome the Packers at home. Thank you all so much for joining us. Mace, appreciate everything you do. Can't wait to follow along with you on game day, and we'll catch up again next week.